we will be discussing a very important gland of digestive system. As you know that the organs of digestive system have been classified into the primary digestive organs and accessory digestive organs. Among the accessory digestive organs, there are two important glands. One is liver and another is pancreas. Here we will be discussing this accessory gland of digestive system called pancreas. Pancreas is basically a dual gland. By dual, it's meant that this gland is both an endocrine gland as well as an exocrine gland. There are so many glands in our body, and these glands can be classified on many different bases. For example, if we classify glands on the number of cells, these glands can be classified as single cell glands and multicellular glands. That means the glands that are made of just one cell are called single cell glands, like the goblet cells in the digestive system. Similarly, many other glands of our body are multicellular glands. Similarly, on the basis of the structure, glands can be divided according to their shape, like saccular glands or acinar glands or tubular glands. If a gland has a shape of a tube, it will be called as a tubular gland. Another way of classifying the glands is upon the presence or absence of the ducts. There are many glands in our body that produce secretions, and these secretions are carried to the locations, to the areas where these secretions are required through a duct. For example, salivary gland. This gland has a duct which carries the secretion of this gland called saliva into the mouth, and it's in the mouth where this saliva is required. There are many other glands in our body that do not have any duct. These glands are called ductless glands or endocrine glands. These endocrine glands produce secretions called hormones, and these hormones are secreted directly into the blood. So, in our body, glands can be classified as the exocrine glands, means the glands that have ducts, and the endocrine glands, which means the glands that do not have ducts. Ductless glands secrete the substances called hormones, and these hormones regulate many functions of our body. So here, this pancreas is both an exocrine gland as well as endocrine gland. This gland produces secretions that are required for digestion in duodenum, and the secretions of this gland are carried to the duodenum through a duct. This makes this duct an exocrine gland. At the same time, this gland has certain regions called islets of Langerhans, which constitute the endocrine part of this gland. This portion produces a hormone called insulin, which regulates the blood sugar levels in our body. So, we can say here that pancreas is a dual gland, which means it is both an endocrine as well as an exocrine gland. The exocrine part of this gland secretes the digestive juices. the secretions of the exocrine part are required for the digestion of food in the duodenum. Endocrine part, as I mentioned earlier, secretes the hormone insulin, which regulates the blood sugar level. Now, let us discuss the structure of this gland. This gland, called pancreas, has a structure of a leaf and can broadly be divided into certain regions like head, neck, body, and a tail. This gland, as I said, has both the parts. So first, let us see the exocrine part of this gland. The main portion of this gland is the exocrine gland. And here, this exocrine part of pancreas is in fact the acinar type of gland or the alveolar type of gland. As I said earlier, that glands can also be classified on the basis of the structure or the shape of the gland, because the pancreas, the exocrine part of the pancreas, has the glands that have a shape of a sac or a bag. That's why this gland will be also called as alveolar type of gland or acinar type of gland. Now, each acinus has the cells that line this bag and are only present in a single layer. Each acinus has a small duct. I can show you here. This exocrine part of pancreas, as I said, is an alveolar or acinar type of gland. So, this is the bag-like or the alveoli-like pattern of this gland, and these cells which line this alveoli or acinus are called the acinar cells, and these acinar cells are arranged in a single layer. Each acinus also has one duct. Many acinus of a particular region of the pancreas join to form a larger duct called intralobar duct. Then many intralobar ducts join to form the major duct or the main duct of this gland, also called as duct of Wirsung. This duct of Wirsung joins the common bile duct and opens into the duodenum, and where it opens into the duodenum, there appears a small papilla or a projection called ampulla of Vater. Thus we can say that the exocrine part of pancreas is made up of many small acinus. Each acinus has a duct. Many acinus join to form intralobar duct. Many acinus groups of different regions and the ducts, that is the intralobar ducts, join to form a big or a major duct which finally opens into the duodenum. But before opening into the duodenum, it joins the common bile duct. Here I would like to show you that this is the shape of pancreas, and it has many acinus. These acinus have small ducts. These ducts join to form intralobar duct. Acinus of different regions then join to form the main duct called duct of Wirsung. This pancreatic duct, which carries the secretions of the pancreas, opens into the duodenum. But before it opens into the duodenum, it's also joined by another duct coming from the liver called common bile duct. Liver is another gland of the body. This gland produces bile which is secreted through a duct called bile duct. The secretion of the bile duct are collected into a small bag-like structure called gallbladder. The duct joining the gallbladder is called as cystic duct. So, the hepatic duct coming from the liver and the cystic duct join to form the common bile duct, which carries the bile from the liver into the duodenum. But before the bile opens into the duodenum and the pancreatic secretions are secreted in the duodenum, these both glands join before opening combinedly. Here in this diagram, you can see the location of the pancreas. It is located just beneath the stomach and its head portion lies inside the duodenum, or you can say that duodenum covers the head portion of the pancreas. In the another diagram, you can see different regions of this gland: the head, a comparatively constricted part called neck, then the main portion of this gland called body, and finally the tail. You can also see in this diagram, and which has been shown enlarged here, is the acinus of this gland. These acinus just appear like small sacs, and they are lined by the single cells also called acinar cells. Each acinus has a duct. Many acinus join to form intralobar ducts, which finally form the main pancreatic duct or duct of Wilson. These acinar cells produce the secretions that are required for the digestion of the food products. Pancreas, or in turn we can say the acinus of this gland, exocrine gland, produce cocktail of enzymes. Means it produces a mixture of so many enzymes that finally help in digestion of the food that we eat. Besides the enzymes, the pancreas also secretes large quantities of bicarbonate ions. The enzymes present in the pancreatic secretions digest all the three forms of our diet. As you know, our diet or food can chemically be divided into three major groups: carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. Pancreatic secretions contain the enzymes for all these three groups, that is, enzymes for the digestion of carbohydrates, enzymes for the digestion of fats, as well as enzymes for the digestion of proteins. Now, the enzymes that digest the proteins are called proteolytic enzymes. So, the pancreatic secretions contain proteolytic enzymes, namely trypsin, chymotrypsin, carboxypeptidase, and elastase. For the digestion of lipids, the enzymes that are contained in the pancreatic secretions are pancreatic lipases, phospholipase A, and cholesterol ester hydrolase. And for the digestion of carbohydrates, pancreas contains pancreatic amylases. This cocktail of enzymes secreted by the pancreas help in the digestion of our food. Thus, we may say that pancreas plays a very important role in the digestion of proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. Besides these digestive enzymes which help in digestion, pancreas also secretes a large amount of bicarbonate. This bicarbonate is secreted by the cells of the ducts. As I said earlier, that pancreas is made up of small acinus which has small ducts. Many ducts join to form the major ducts. Now the cells that line these ducts produce this bicarbonate secretion. This bicarbonate secretion is very important for protection of the duodenal mucosa. As we know that when the food reaches the stomach contains large quantities of strong acid. So, after the food is mixed with the acid of the stomach, it becomes very much acidic. And this acidic chyme, when goes into the duodenum, can damage the duodenal mucosa. Chyme means the liquefied food that comes from the stomach, or food after liquefaction in the stomach is called chyme. So usually this term chyme is applied to the food after it passes the stomach. So this chyme coming from the stomach is highly acidic and can damage the walls and the mucosa of the duodenum. This chyme, acidic chyme, needs to be neutralized. So here the pancreatic bicarbonates play a very important role in neutralizing this acidic chyme. So whenever the acidic chyme enters the duodenum, this provides a stimulus for the secretion of the bicarbonate ions from the duct cells of the pancreas. Thus we may say that the enzymes produced by the pancreas are secreted from the acinar cells, and the bicarbonate secreted by the pancreas is produced in the duct cells. It's because of their location, different location they are produced at, their regulation is also separate. The secretion of enzymes from the pancreas is regulated by an important gastrointestinal hormone called cholecystokinin. There are certain hormones that are released in the gastrointestinal tract from the endocrine cells lining the GI mucosa. Among them, cholecystokinin is a very important hormone. This hormone stimulates the acinar cells of the pancreas to produce the enzymatic secretions. On the contrary, the bicarbonate secretion from the duct cells is regulated by another hormone of the GIT called secretin. So, whenever the food reaches the stomach and that food needs to be digested, the constituents of the food stimulate the enzyme cholecystokinin that stimulate the acinar cells, and acinar cells secrete a large amount of enzymes which digest the food. At the same time, the acidic chyme or the acidity of the food in the duodenum stimulates the hormone secretin, which in turn stimulates the ductal cells of the pancreas to secrete large quantities of bicarbonate. This bicarbonate, when reached the duodenum, neutralizes the acidity of the chyme and thereby making the chyme neutral. In this way, pancreas not only has the digestive function but also a very important protective function. Thank you. We will be discussing another accessory gland of the digestive tract called salivary glands. Salivary glands produce a secretion called saliva, that is secreted by the salivary glands into the mouth. And this saliva performs many different functions, including it initiates the digestion of the carbohydrates. Digestive system, as I said, is associated with many glands. Accessory glands of the digestive system, as I mentioned earlier, are liver, pancreas, and salivary glands. The salivary glands, which are located around the mouth, are of two types: major salivary glands and the minor salivary glands. There are some glands which are very small and contribute to the saliva, and those are called as minor salivary glands. But in this lecture, we will be focusing on the major salivary glands. Major salivary glands are: number 1, parotid glands; submandibular glands; and number 3, sublingual glands. Parotid glands are the largest salivary glands, and they are situated just below and to the front of the ear. Here you can see if this is our ear, parotid gland is located just below and in front of the ear. This is the largest of the salivary glands, and this gland has a duct, and this duct opens into the cheek opposite the upper second molar. Another gland is the submaxillary or submandibular gland, and as the name suggests, it is located in the submaxillary triangle medial to the mandible. And the ducts of this submaxillary gland open at the sides of the frenulum of the tongue. If you have ever seen your tongue on a mirror, if you roll it upside, you can see a small thread or a tie-like structure holding the tongue. This is called as the frenulum of the tongue. On the both sides of the frenulum, you can see sometimes the saliva secreting out, coming out of it. It's because the ducts of the submaxillary gland are located on both sides of the frenulum of the tongue. Now, third major salivary gland is the sublingual glands. These are smallest of the 3 salivary glands, and they are situated at the floor of the mouth. Sublingual glands have many small ducts, from approximately 5 to 15 small ducts that open on small papilla beneath the tongue. And this sublingual glands also has a major duct that joins the submaxillary duct and then opens at the frenulum of the tongue. So we can say that salivary glands are the accessory glands of the digestive system that secrete saliva. Salivary glands can be divided into 2 groups: major salivary glands and the smaller minor salivary glands. Major salivary glands are of 3 types: parotid glands that are located at the root of the ear, then submandibular gland which are located beneath the mandible, and sublingual gland that are located beneath the tongue. Here in this diagram, you can see the location of the 3 salivary glands. The largest one is the parotid gland, located to the front and just below the ear. The duct of this gland opens in the inside of the cheek opposite the second molar tooth on the upper side. You can also see the submandibular gland, and then the smallest of the all three, the sublingual gland. The salivary glands are also of the alveolar or the acinar type of glands. That means they are sac-like glands and have a duct. Salivary glands have structure similar to the pancreatic duct. That means it has a blind acinus and a small duct. Acinus is lined by the acinar cells and ducts are lined by the duct cells. Now let us discuss the secretion saliva secreted by the salivary glands. These salivary glands secrete approximately 800 to about 500 ml of saliva per day. The saliva contains mostly water, which is approximately 99.5% of the total. So we can say the saliva contains mostly the water. Only 0.5% are the other substances that are dissolved in the saliva. These are enzyme, amylase, certain inorganic substances like sodium, potassium, calcium, bicarbonate. Saliva also contains thiocyanate ions, iodide, and also an enzyme called lysozyme. This saliva secreted by the salivary glands, which are an acinar type of gland, has many different functions. The first important function of the saliva is to maintain the oral health. It's because of the constant secretion of the saliva, which I said is approximately 800 to 1500 ml per day, our mouth is constantly rinsed and washed. Because when we eat food, many small particles of food are left in our mouth, and this debris of food is usually trapped between the teeth and in other smaller cavities. It is this saliva that washes off this food debris and prevents a material for the bacterial growth. Our mouth contains many different bacteria which use this food which we eat for their purpose. So, if the bacteria are provided continuously with this food, they will grow and multiply in our mouth and will cause many different diseases of teeth and oral cavity. And it is this saliva that washes off this debris and does not give the bacteria their food so that they do not proliferate and grow in our oral cavity. Now, apart from washing or rinse the oral cavity, our saliva also contains an enzyme called lysozyme. This enzyme is helpful in killing the bacteria. This lysozyme basically digests the bacterial wall and therefore kills them and keeps our mouth healthy and devoid of these bacteria. Besides lysozyme, thiocyanate and iodide also kill the bacteria that cause their growth and that cause many diseases of the mouth. The bacteria in our mouth use the food for their metabolism, that means for their energy purposes, for their growth and multiplication. And when they use this food, they usually produce acid. This acid produced by the bacteria in the mouth dissolve the surface of our teeth, the outer surface of our teeth, which is called as enamel, and they in this way create caries, the dental caries. So the growth of bacteria or the multiplication of a bacteria in our mouth, by using the food, they also produce a lot more acid which can destroy our teeth and produce dental caries. In this way, saliva not only checks the growth of the bacteria but also does not allow the food debris to stay in the mouth, thus indirectly protects our teeth from decay or from the action of the bacteria and the action of the acid they produce. Also, the acid produced by the bacteria in the mouth is also neutralized by the saliva because it contains bicarbonate. So on the one side, it does not allow the bacteria to produce more acid by reducing their number, and if they produce acid at all, it's neutralized by the saliva, by the bicarbonate of the saliva. Saliva also contains calcium, which is helpful for the protection of our teeth, because our teeth are made of the calcium salts. So the calcium that is present in the saliva is also absorbed on the surface of these of our teeth, and in this way protect our teeth and also repair the wear and tear of our teeth. Second function of the saliva, which is not though important, is that it helps in swallowing of the food. If our mouth is dry, it will make the swallowing of food a little bit difficult, especially the foods that are very much dry. For example, if we try to swallow a dry piece of bread, it will be difficult for us to swallow. Saliva lubricates the food, the bowls of food that is present in our mouth, and thereby aids in swallowing. Apart from helping in swallowing, it also protects the mucosa of our mouth and esophagus from laceration, because our saliva contains a lot of mucus, and which not only lubricates the food and makes it easier to swallow, but also protects our mucosa from the damage by the food. Saliva also helps in the appreciation of the taste. Our food contains many chemicals that give us the sensation of the taste, and taste is perceived by the taste buds located on our tongue. These taste buds are located on the papilla of the tongue and have small pits over their surface. These chemicals of the food that are important for the appreciation of taste get dissolved in the saliva, and in this way reach to the taste buds easily, and therefore help us in the appreciation of the taste of food. So besides protecting the oral cavity and helping in swallowing, it also helps in appreciation of the taste of the food. And the very important function of saliva is the digestion of the carbohydrates. As I have said in the composition of the saliva, that it contains an enzyme called amylase. This amylase is a carbohydrate digesting enzyme. So when we eat food, that food contains starch, so the saliva contains amylase, and that amylase, that enzyme, acts on the food in our mouth and starts digesting the carbohydrates. Thus we can say the digestion of the carbohydrates starts in the mouth by the action of salivary amylase. Another function of saliva is its role in speech. When our mouth is dry, we are unable to speak, and it becomes very difficult in the articulation of the words. Saliva lubricates our mouth and moistens our tongue and the regions around, and thereby makes it easy for pronunciation and articulation during speech. Now we will be discussing an accessory organ of the digestive system called teeth. Teeth are very important in many ways apart from helping in digestion. Teeth also give a shape to our face. That means it has also a cosmetic purpose. So first let us see the structure of our teeth. Our teeth can be divided into different regions. The portion that comes out of the gums is called as the crown, and the portion that is hidden inside the gums is called the root. And in between these two regions, that's crown and neck, there is a small portion that is a bit narrow and is called as the neck. So the tooth can be divided into number 1, the crown, the portion that protrudes out from the gum into the mouth. Second, root, the portion that lies within the bony socket of the jaw. And third, the neck, the collar between the crown and the root. Now, if we cut a section of a tooth in the vertical plane or the sagittal plane, we can see that an outer covering of the tooth called enamel. This part of tooth is resistant both to the mechanical pressure as well as to the acids also. Beneath the enamel is the main body of the tooth, which is called as dentin. This dentin is similar to the composition of the bones of our body. Our bones and this dentin have almost the same chemical composition. This portion is also hard, but not as hard as the enamel. Below the enamel is the pulp. Pulp is the cavity inside the tooth, and it's filled with connective tissue, nerve fibers, and blood vessels. Apart from these three layers of a tooth, there is also another layer called cementum. This cementum is a bony substance which lines the tooth and holds it in place. Here you can see that if this is our gum, the portion coming out of it will be called as crown, and the portion of the tooth inside the gums is called root. Here a collar like area is called as the neck. Now if we cut the tooth in a sagittal plane, we will see an outer layer which is hardest, called enamel. Beneath the enamel is another area, the main body of the tooth, called dentin. This dentin is similar in composition to that of our bones, and on the inside is the pulp cavity. This pulp cavity contains connective tissue as well as blood vessels and nerve fibers. So when we cut a tooth in the sagittal plane, we will see an outer layer, enamel, then the dentin and the pulp cavity, which contains nerve fibers and blood vessels. Also, there is a layer here which is called as cementum. This cementum holds the tooth into the socket of the jaw. So this is basically a cementing material, that's why it's called as cementum. Also in this diagram shown here, you can see these layers very vividly. First the enamel, then the major body of the tooth, dentin, then the pulp cavity containing blood vessels and nerve fibers, and the cementum that holds the tooth into the socket of the jaw. You must have seen that we have about 28 to 32 number of teeth. But before we have these teeth in the adult life, we also have teeth when we are small, and we have seen that these teeth fall up to the age of 8 years. And then we grow new teeth which continue throughout the life. Actually, we have two sets of teeth in our lifetime. First set of teeth is called the deciduous or the milk teeth. These are the teeth that erupt when we are infant and child. Milk teeth start to appear at the age of the 7 months. In most of the children, the teeth appear at the age between 6 months to 7 months. And the first teeth to appear are the lower central incisors. These milk teeth or deciduous teeth are 20 in number. These are the central incisors, the lateral incisors, then the canines, and the first molar, premolar, and the second premolar. Here I can show you, if we divide our mouth into upper and lower portion, this is the right half and this is the left half. So we have first the central incisors, then the lateral incisors, canine, first premolar and second premolar. Similarly, we will have same number of teeth on this side, lateral incisor, canines, first premolar and second premolar. In this way, we will have 5 teeth on this side and 5 teeth on this side on the lower jaw. Similarly, 5 on the upper and 5 on the right upper side. So the total number of teeth in the child or our primary milk teeth are 20 in number. Now these milk teeth are replaced by the permanent teeth, which start to appear after the age of 7 years onwards. Now these teeth, 20 teeth, will be replaced by the permanent teeth. In addition, molars about 8 to 12 also appear posteriorly in the jaw, and therefore make the number of the permanent teeth to approximately 28 to 32. So we can say that we have 2 sets of teeth in our lifetime: the milk teeth that erupt early in the life and start erupting at the age of 7 months onwards up to the 2nd year of life, and these milk teeth last up to 6th to 13th year of life. And then these teeth are replaced by the permanent teeth. The number of permanent teeth is 28 to 32. Here in this diagram, you can see the central incisors, the lateral incisor, the canine, first premolar, second premolar, first molar, second molar, and third molar. This means this is the dentition of an adult person, and the number you can see here is 16 on the lower jaw and 16 on the upper jaw, thus making the total number of permanent teeth a total of 32. Now what are the functions of the teeth? Now, teeth are made to cut, grind and mix the food. For these function, teeth are also provided with a forceful jaw muscles. So the teeth along with the muscles of the jaw produce so much of pressure and force that they cut, grind and mix the food. Now, if we measure the pressure on the front teeth, that is about 50 to 100 pounds, and this is used for cutting. Our front teeth, which are comparatively sharper, are used for cutting the food. We cut the food with our front teeth, and the pressure which is produced here by the teeth and the muscles, the force of the muscles of the mastication or chewing is about 100 pounds. The back teeth, that's the molars, produce a pressure of about 150 to 250 pounds, and these teeth are used for grinding the food. So during chewing of the food, we usually first cut the food, and then the posterior teeth or the molars, where the pressure is more, that's about 250 pounds, the food is grinded into the paste. So we must say that the function of the teeth is to cut, grind and mix the food, but this is not possible without the strong jaw muscles. Cutting of the food is very important for its digestion. It's especially important for the raw fruits and vegetables. If you have seen a vegetable or a fruit, it has an outer covering. Usually the nutrition portion is inside that outer peel. So when we chew the food with our teeth, that outer covering of the fruits or the vegetables is broken down, and the inner nutritious part comes out, that is acted upon by our enzymes inside the mouth and digestive tract, and therefore provide the nutrition. If we swallow the whole fruit which has a covering on it, it will be difficult for our digestive system to digest that outer covering, which usually contains cellulose. So the cutting and grinding by the teeth is very important for the foods or the fruits that contain an outer peel made of cellulose. Another very important function of this chewing or cutting of the food is to increase the surface area of the food. When we chew the food, it's broken into the smaller particles, and thereby the surface area of the food is increased. The increased surface area of the food makes it easy for the digestive enzymes to act upon it, and therefore the digestion is made easier after chewing. Besides this, chewing of food also protects the posterior mouth and the pharynx and the esophagus from the laceration by the food. If the foods are solid or have the surfaces that can damage the mucosa, chewing by the teeth makes it smoother and therefore prevents any type of laceration that it may cause in the mucosa of the mouth. To summarize this, we must say that our teeth has the portion that is seen protruding out of the gum, which is called as the crown, and the hidden part of the tooth that lies within the gum is called the root. The sagittal section of the tooth shows many layers. Outer layer is enamel, inner to the enamel is dentin, and then is the pulp cavity, which contains connective tissue, nerves and blood vessels. We have two sets of teeth in our lifetime. The milk teeth that erupt at the age of 7 months up to 2.5 years, and which last for 6 to 13 years of age. These milk teeth are 20 in number. Then permanent teeth start to appear, and these permanent teeth replace the milk teeth or deciduous teeth. The permanent teeth are 32 in number. The function of the teeth is to cut, mix and grind the food. This is accomplished with the forceful contraction produced by the jaw muscles. Thus, jaw muscles help the teeth to grind and mix the food so that it becomes easier for many foods to be digested easily in the digestive tract. Now we will be discussing another part of our digestive tract, the tongue. Tongue is located in our mouth and it is a muscular organ. The whole of the tongue is made up of muscle, and this muscle is voluntary muscle, which means that these muscles are under our control. That's why we can move the tongue as per our will. We can roll it up, we can move it to the sides. It's because the muscles of the tongue are voluntary. In our body, there are 3 types of muscles. Skeletal muscles, that is the muscles that are associated with our bone and help us in the movements. These muscles are called skeletal muscles and are voluntary in nature. That means they are under our control. Another muscle is the cardiac muscle, that is the muscles of the heart. These muscles are involuntary. That means the contraction of heart is not in our control. It contracts automatically and we can not stop it or make it contract. Another type of muscle is the smooth muscles. These are the muscles that form the hollow viscera of our body. They form different tubes of our body like GIT, which is also a tube. The muscles in this GIT are smooth muscles. These muscles are also involuntary. That means they are also not under our voluntary control, but they are automatically controlled by the body. So here the tongue, which is a muscular organ, is made of the muscles that are voluntary. That means we can move the tongue at our will. Tongue is situated in the floor of the mouth and can be divided into 2 portions. The portion of the tongue that lies into the posterior of the mouth is called the pharyngeal part, and the part of the tongue that lies in the mouth is called the oral part. Both the oral part, that is the anterior part of the tongue that lies in the mouth, is separated from the posterior part by a V-shaped sulcus called the sulcus terminalis, which means the tongue is divided by sulcus terminalis into the posterior part or the pharyngeal part, that is the part of the tongue that lies in the pharynx, and the oral part, that is the part of the tongue that lies in the mouth or the oral cavity. The length of the tongue is approximately 3 inches. So from the area where it starts to the tip of the tongue, the length is 3 inches. The tongue is very mobile, which means that we can move it in any direction. We can roll it, we can move it to the sides. So the tongue is a very mobile organ. However, at the same time, being mobile, we never swallow our own tongue. This is because the tongue is anchored at certain places of the mouth. It's anchored to the hyoid bone posteriorly in the pharynx, and it's also anchored, that means attached to the mandible and the soft plate. So the anchoring of the tongue to the hyoid bone, mandible and the soft plate helps tongue to remain in place and not being swallowed by the body. Now this tongue has 3 parts. One is the root, that means the portion where it is anchored posteriorly in the hyoid bone, that will be called as root. Then the main body, that is the surface of the tongue we usually see, and this main body of the tongue has two surfaces, upper surface, which is also called as dorsum of the tongue, and a surface that is beneath the tongue, which is called as inferior surface. The third part of the tongue is the tip. So the tongue can first be divided by a V-shaped sulcus called sulcus terminalis into the posterior or the pharyngeal part and the oral part. Also, the tongue can be divided into three parts called the root, the body, and the tip. Now, apart from this muscular structure of the tongue, the lining of the tongue or the mucosa of the tongue is very special. The surface of the tongue, especially the superior surface or the dorsum of the tongue, is covered by a special structure called the papilla of the tongue. The papilla or the small projections of the tongue which give the tongue a characteristic roughness. You must have seen on a mirror that our tongue appears rough and velvety. This rough appearance is because of the presence of many papilla on its surface. These papilla are basically small projections of the mucous membrane of the tongue. These papilla are of many types, and they have been divided into three major groups. First group is circumvallate papilla. These are the largest of the papilla found on the tongue, and their size is about 1 to 2 mm. They are about 8 to 12 in number and are arranged in an inverted V shape at the back of the tongue. If you ever look in a mirror, your tongue, on the posterior of the tongue, on the back of the tongue, you will see eruptions or the finger-like projections of the papilla which are arranged in the inverted V-shaped structure. These are the papilla, that is the circumvallate papilla. Another type of papilla on the surface of the tongue, on the dorsum of the tongue, and are numerous in size. These are called as fungiform papilla. These are the medium-sized papilla, that is, these are smaller than the circumvallate papilla, and they are identified by their bright red color. These bright red color papilla are also seen usually on the tips and the margin of the tongue. Another type of papilla, which is the smallest of the papilla and most numerous, is the filiform papilla. They cover the whole of the central area of the tongue, and it's because of these filiform papilla that our tongue has a characteristic velvety appearance. So, the tongue, which is a muscular structure comprising of voluntary muscles, is very mobile, but at the same time anchored to the hyoid bone, mandible and soft plate, 3 inches long, has a mucous membrane covering which appears rough because of the papilla. These papilla are of 3 types: circumvallate, the largest papilla, which are arranged in an inverted V shape and are the largest, and in number they are 8 to 12. Another type of papilla is the fungiform papilla, which are bright red in color, and the smallest of the papilla are the filiform papilla that cover most of the central area of the tongue. In the diagram here, you can see first the pharyngeal part of the tongue and the oral part of the tongue. And these both parts of the tongue, that is the part that lies in the pharynx and the part that lies in the mouth, are separated by a V-shaped sulcus called sulcus terminalis. Also, you can see the papilla, which give the tongue a characteristic rough and velvety appearance. On the posterior, you can see the large side papilla, which are arranged in an inverted V shape and are about 8 to 12 in number, called circumvallate papilla.